that was almost the wrong pipe, and you guys would have heard me choking. All right. Good afternoon to everyone. So you'll notice there's some new faces in here. So in chapter 6, which is what we're covering today for marriage and family, it's actually all about communication. So when I talked to Professor Becker about that, we thought it'd be a good idea to have like a little bit of a teacher exchange program. So for today, if you're in communication in our public speaking class, you're going to learn a little bit about the sociology of communication, specifically among relationships. Today, we're going to cover vulnerability. We're going to cover different theories on power and power dynamics within conversations. And then next week for my marriage and family class, you guys are going to hear more from Professor Becker on actual communication, nonverbal versus verbal, different theories of communication and all that. So we're doing a bit of an exchange program. It'll be a lot of fun. Okay, so real quick though, let me go ahead and take roll from my class. So Denise is here, Adam's here, Taylor, you're here, Lisa's here, Malia's here, Cameron's here, Sadie is here, and Hannah's here. Okay. All right, we got everyone. Oh, actually Hannah said she was going to be on Zoom. So I guess I should check that. And she's not on yet, so hopefully that'll happen soon. Okay. All right. Well, if she hops on, we'll get her in here. Okay. All right. So this chapter is all about communication. So for you guys coming in from public speaking, you're already pros on this, right? You already know how to public speak, constantly negotiate, all that. Good to go. Okay. So for those, oh, and then you can see me twice, which is unfortunate. So let's minimize that. No need to see. Oh, that's even worse. There's no getting rid of it. Okay.
Are you recording?
I am recording. I had a student that said that they might hop on Zoom here in a little bit. All right. All right. So we're going to start off this chapter and we're going to talk about different theories of power within any relationship, whether that be a couple, a significant other, whether that be between parents and children, grandchildren and grandparents, nieces and nephews, whatever it is. Whenever there's a relationship, there's usually some sort of power dynamic there, whether it be you're on equal footing, you have equal statuses and roles, so your power is the same, whether that be, you're a parent, theoretically you should have more power than your child, but then there's plenty of relationships where the child has power over their parents. Anyone seen Mean Girls? Right? Perfect example, Regina, whatever her face is. I forget her last name, but she's got Regina George. She's got power over her parents. So we're going to look at different theories of power. First of all, we want to get the definition down. Power is the ability to exercise one's will. So you see this come up a lot, especially when we talk about laws and government. We always talk about power. For example, one of the topics so for communication class, one of the topics we talk about a lot in this class is abortion, because it's very highly, contested. There's different like pro-life, pro-choice. So one of the main things that comes when we talk about abortion is power. Should a woman have power over her own body, or does the life supersede that power to make her own choices? So that's kind of one of the examples that we talk about when we talk about this. This is what the definition of power is: being able to do what you want. So unequal power. So whether it be in a relationship, whether it be in a contractual contract, whatever it might be, unequal power, it can inhibit your satisfaction. It can inhibit the ability that you have to feel love, your ability to be able to share feelings, and even your own self-esteem. Now, no need to answer this, but just knowing from experience, I know there's probably at least 1 or 2 relationships that you've had in your life where you felt like you didn't have power, whether that was with a spouse, whether that was with a boyfriend, girlfriend, with your parents. And you'll probably think, and you'll be like, well, I didn't have power, were these things going on? So if you think back on it, then yeah, there's a good chance that, if you're in an unequal power relationship, that you're going through these things. And I see a few pencils moving, so I'll give you guys a couple more seconds. But the next slide is actually going to talk to us a little bit about the data, because I can say whatever I want, but we got to have data to back it up. Okay, so studies were done by sociologists that looked at unequal power relationships, and they tried to say, what is the data telling us? Okay, and that research showed that, you know, people that have chronically little power, so not just like in like, oh, you go and buy a car and they swindle you big time and you get screwed. Like, you know, obviously unequal power there, but this is chronic stuff. This is over time. They showed that if you are in a chronically little power situation, you suffer from depression more, you have a lower IQ, which that one kind of crazy to think about, that lower, like your IQ actually lowers as you're in these relationships, and you're more likely to suffer from manipulation. I might be dating myself here, but anyone old enough to have watched Hey Arnold when you were growing up? Okay, big raise of hands, right? Okay, so anyone remember, okay, what's Helga Pataki, right? She's Arnold's love interest. For those that haven't seen the show, you're probably like, what the heck is he talking about? But within the show, so Helga's got her parents, so she's got Bob Pataki and whatever her mom's name is, which I forget, which is pretty indicative of their relationship. In that relationship on that show, Bob has all the power, and her mom, Helga's mom, is absolutely displaying all of these things. Like, she's manipulated, she has depression, she's generally seen as a lower IQ individual. So Lisa and then Kylie.
Doesn't she like hint like that she's drinking a lot too? Like,
Yeah, alluded that she's day drinking all the time. Yes.
Liquid lunch. Yeah.
So just as kind of a thing for some of my students, and I guess sociology students too, what are some of the groups that you guys can think of, or types of people who would fall into that chronically lower power?
Women under domestic violence.
Domestic violence victims, whether they be women or men. People in poverty.
That's a
or
big one.
socioeconomic status. What about ability or disability? Mental illness.
Yeah, all of the above. Any sort of thing that puts you at a disadvantage in life, whether that be the situation that you live in, domestic violence, whether that be a disability, physical, mental, emotional, mental illness, all of these things can lead to where you have little power in relationships. Did we talk about that in Marriage and Family? In the media, it often portrays like violent killers as like the mentally ill. Oh, they're mentally unstable. That was in Social Problems. Lisa's in all my classes, which works out great. Okay. And then Kendra's in intro. So we've got all the classes covered right now. Okay. So in Social Problems, we talk about the media portrays mental illness as like, oh, these are the extremely violent. These are the ones that, you know, go out and go on the shooting sprees. But really, statistically speaking, if you have a mental illness or if you're in an unequal power relationship, you're more likely to be the victim of a crime than to be the perpetrator of a crime. So excellent points all around. Like it. Oh, and I forgot to go over our schedule, but when we get to the end of class, I'll let you guys out a little bit. Does your class go for like an hour 25 as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Or hour 15, whatever it is. Okay. So Raven et al. So Raven and his or hers researchers, they came up and they tried to identify 6 types of power in a relationship. So they went through and they're like, hey, there's a bunch of different types of power, and let's try and identify the different types and how they work. So number 1 is coercive power. So this is, I'm worried you'll punish me, so I'm giving you power because I don't want to get punished. Whether that be, so Lisa brought up domestic violence. The abuser is in a place of power because the individual is worried about getting beaten, or getting attacked. If we're talking about between parents and children, you know, oh, I'm going to give you a spanking, I'm going to ground you, I'm going to take your toy away. Which, you know, among parents, you know, not necessarily a bad thing, unless it's to the extreme, like, oh, I'm not going to feed you for a week because you won't stop crying. Like, that would be absolutely abusive. But if it's just like, hey, you know, you're playing with your toys and I told you have to clean your room first, so I'm going to take your toys away, that's understandable. So these power levels, these different types of power, you'll see that some are a little bit more malevolent than others are. Reward power, that's, I'm going to go along with you in hopes that you reward me. So that's, hey, clean your room and I'll give you a brownie. Or, hey, study for this test and you'll get an A and maybe you'll go get a scholarship. Okay. In that situation, whoever's giving you the scholarship is the one in power. They can give you that money. Are you going to quiz your students on what we go over today?
Well, aren't you giving them a quiz on this? feel
I
like
am,
that's
yes.
great.
Did you want to, that's why I was asking if you wanted to double up on that. Okay, so we'll double up with you.
It's like, spoiler alert.
Yeah,
write
so
these down.
I'll have so how many are from your class? 1, 2,
5.
3, 4, 5. So they can be, or 4 or 5. So they can actually be there on groups. So I'll have them go over with you and they can work together on it because it's a group quiz.
Am I allowed to give them all the answers?
No.
Oh.
Well, I mean, you're their teacher, up to you, I guess. I'm not helping my students though. I know, messed up, right? Don't worry, we're already halfway through the semester. You only have to be with me for a few more weeks. Okay, expert power. This is, hey, you're the boss in this area, not necessarily bad. For example, anyone here know how to defuse bombs? No, okay, that's not reassuring if anything happens. Did you get that email, bomb threat, up on the Payson campus?
When?
Today the 13th?
Yeah.
Today.
What time?
In the morning. The police went and checked it out. It wasn't credible. They went and
Oh.
swept the campus, so everything's normal.
I did not get that email, and if I did, I was just like, normal, whatever.
Oh, what? I just scrolled through bomb threat, everyday kind of stuff. No, so that happened. So I was it made me think of that example. Okay, expert power in this situation was if there was a bomb threat, if there was a bomb in the room, we had to defuse it. We're gonna, go ahead and concede power to whoever has that skill, whoever's an expert, whoever has that talent. In this scenario, say I know how to defuse a bomb. At this point, it's okay, yeah, go ahead, you defuse it. I'm not gonna go ahead and step in on that one. Unless Taylor, you feel confident, you think you could do it? Oh, she's got it. All right. Well, either me or Taylor. If I had to step out, Taylor got it. Okay. Legitimate power. So this is kind of seen as kind of the most socially acceptable kinds of power, because this is the power of the people. This is the power of, hey, we are all consenting to this. I'll do what society thinks is best. It's my duty to do this. So you see this a lot in the military. Everyone here registered to vote? If you're not registered yet, they extended the deadline so you can get registered, but voting itself is a legitimate power. Hey, we believe in voting. We're going to vote for this person. If they get the majority of votes, they're in, and we're going to give them power because we think that democracy is the best way to go. And it's my duty as a citizen to honor the majority of people. Okay. And the last two we're going to talk about, and you're going to want to make sure you have all these written down in some capacity or another, because the quiz is open book and open group. Okay. Anyone from my class brought their book today? We usually don't use it, so I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. All right. Referent power. Okay. So this is, hey, I'll do it because we're a couple and I want to please you. So you're in a relationship and your spouse or your significant other or whatever gets home. And they're like, hey, can you do the dishes and I'll cook dinner? And it's all right, I don't want to do the dishes, but I'm going to give you power in the situation because I want to make you happy. And the last one is informational power. You're being very convincing. I tell you guys that Gila Hank Grill is the best restaurant in the Gila Valley. And some of you are automatically no, La Paloma beats it by a long, anyone have, what's favorite restaurants here in the Gila Valley?
El Mesquite?
El Mesquite's fantastic. Yeah. What? Taylor Freeze is a good one.
CNC Sideaway.
Is that the one at the base of Mount Graham?
Yeah, they have good hush puppies.
I have not been to that one, so I can't speak on that one. Okay. Hamburgers are pretty good. All right. So we're getting all this information. And so if I were to say, hey, this is Gila Hank's the best grill in the Gila Valley, and this is why, and I give you all this information, for public speaking individuals, this is your persuasive speech. You go in with facts and data and you're appealing to their emotions and hey, this is what's going on. That's informational power. At that point, you give a persuasive speech and they're okay, I believe you. That's giving them power. Whether it be equal or unequal, you're saying, yeah, I get that. Okay, so public speaking, I'll have you go sit by your teacher and we're going to do our in-class quiz. So we're going to get in groups of 3 or 4. So for my class, let's see. So Leah, Lisa, and Nisa, you guys will be a group, and then Sadie, Taylor, Cameron, and Abby, you guys will be a group. So you're going to work together. And what you're going to do is you're going to use the following 6 types of power. So you're going to go through each one: coercive, reward, expert. And how many of you have seen an election ad today? You got on YouTube and you saw an ad today. How many of you in the last week? So just about everyone, those that haven't seen it yet, good for you for avoiding them, because honestly, it's like dodgeball out here. You're just getting smacked from all sides and you didn't see it coming. So what I want you to do is imagine, like, think back to the ads that you saw, and I want you to identify which type of power those ads were using. You know, if it was an ad saying, oh, well, you know, under my leadership, this is what's gone on, that's kind of an informational power. Yes?
Okay, so one thing that I'd like to add with this is my students, I'm sure we've talked about this before, but for those of you who aren't, think about how people are physically presented in this way too. Because how you look and how you show yourself is part of power. Because like if Travis had come in the first day, you know, he looks pretty young. If he had come in, you know, llama pajama pants and, you know, a tank top, you would have immediately been like, this guy doesn't have any power to an extent. Like he doesn't have any credibility. He's obviously not an expert. You know, he's not he doesn't look legitimate. Why did they let him be here? Are we really going to trust what he has to say? So think about that too. You can also talk about how the way people physically present themselves. Because like expert power, you see someone in a lab coat and you kind of immediately associate that with, oh, lab coat, scientist, expert. Or someone in a suit, legitimate. So just little tidbit to add on to that, because I was here in the morning class and was kind of looking over theirs and I was like, nobody talked about like perception and how people physically present themselves. So
I like it. Okay, so if you can't think of an ad that kind of fits that description, what I want you to do is create your own ad. Like, you know, this is like, what kind of ad would you create for either Trump's campaigns or Biden's campaign or McSally or Kelly or whoever it is. So go ahead and divide up into your groups. Joke's on you. I did wear llama pajama pants to class first day. So.
Did you really?
No.
I was like, I believe it.
Yeah.
I only say that because I own llama pajama pants and they're my Christmas PJs.
I mean, who doesn't really? Okay. So, Emily, I'll come over here.
Yeah, I think our students are just moving over here.
And this quiz took the last pass about 10, 15 minutes because you really, I mean, it's graded, so you really want to hash out everything, make sure you got all the information.
Is it one paper for the whole group?
Yeah, one paper for the whole group. So each group you'll assign like a scribe.
Nice stand running. Yeah, so like it's probably gonna be one of
Is that 8 salads?
you've been voluntold. That's I love it.
You're really good. Sorry.
So I'm still so you won't have to.
I'm gonna have to stay on the same one.
I'll have to like time lapse.
Is that Thursday?
Next Tuesday.
Yeah, it's like taking.
I haven't gotten any, like, we might have a hiring committee starting at 10.
Oh, from the library.
So.
No, for the prison automotive program.
Oh,
Yeah, so that class starts at 9:30, right?
Yeah.
I'm worried
So it could be even more.
So we can do like,
Class, how to finish up my last one.
make salaries, what we do, get rid of healthcare or whatever.
So then afternoon class, I think, so we'll do the first,
Giving her powers to do work.
and then we need to finish up. Yeah, but I just, like I said, I haven't gotten the email confirming it, but I'm pretty sure we have a 10 o'clock hiring committee. But it will be in one of these classrooms here, so I'll be able to. Yeah. We put that as a component, but if they're doing with, I mean, I believe getting all like my dad, my mom had to go back for surgery. She broke her hip this weekend, and she had her surgery Sunday morning, and then she had to go back to Wednesday, so she was bleeding.
Let's put that one for me.
I wish I knew this was Yeah, so I'll look over that if there's anything like specifically you want me to talk about. Otherwise, if you'll just give me like free rein to just talk about like nonverbals and stuff like that, I can do a quick kind of overview of all of it, because I can talk about like proxemics, so nonverbals of like if you're asking for a favor and you're up like this, people tend to be just like
Arms like this.
yeah. Especially right now when people are like arms like this.
6 feet. That's actually how I measured the chairs when I got on the desk and I laid out. So I'm 6'2". I'm like, okay, my feet aren't here, my head's here, we're good.
I just brought in a measuring tape, and someone kept moving more chairs in my room. So I'm just like, I'm giving up here. Stop touching chairs.
No one wants to sit next to each other in class. Even if I had extra chairs here, we would all be like a chair apart.
But yeah, I think it'll be fun. I really like the nonverbals and stuff, and let's talk about like artifacts and stuff too. And then I go like ask about wedding rings and tattoos and all that fun jazz.
Warehouse 13.
That's kind of an old show too.
I love that show. Like you say artifacts, that's like where I go when I think about that one.
Yeah, I think of like archaeology too, and then I think it's like, and then I think of like communication artifacts. Like you wear a wedding ring, that's an artifact that communicates. You're not gonna be out, trying to hit on chicks.
In sociology, that's symbolic interactionism. So we talk about symbols. So we call them symbols. You call them artifacts.
Yeah.
All the same thing. But
Man, why can't sociology just get on the same page and be good like communication?
I can uninvite you.
No, it gives me something to do.
Oh,
I was watching the YouTube the other day.
If you can't think of an example, you can create.
or
You can make one up.
Yeah, you can make one up.
or how Biden's been in
Basically,
I
it's
don't
just
think
like,
I remember having to live that.
30
this
years.
person's trying to.
He must be good.
So you were prepping for this.
Yeah.
You're studying for the quiz.
Yep. So and so gets elected, they'll take away your Medicare or Medicaid, or your taxes will go up. So that one other person in office for another 4 years. Shut up. Inflation will be saying, oh, I'm elected, and
Calm down.
these are the things that are going to. And of course, when they know if you go like this person, then.
I can't talk.
I mean, it could be, but it's also like, well, it's your guys' thing, it's your quiz.
Oh, look at that, you even got the voted.
Yeah, I got mine, and I put it on my phone.
Well,
This morning.
We don't believe it, so we don't
The
want to
thing is
say
with
it.
power is you can have multiple types of power happening at the same time. There's
For a lot of
no
people,
really
that is how they
basis,
vote.
it's one type of
Oh,
power that's
they're supposed to
unless they're
follow
literally
it.
gonna say like, Ian, unless you can repeat the holy crap out of you. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you would. I'm sure you would.
Well, what do you like?
It's just a name, it's fine.
Let's do. I hate Biden.
I always kind of asked him how he more than like orange is taller than me.
You would say you gotta get your house under their picks and low them up and then.
Whatever, just some sort of ad showing.
I mean, not maybe not leave it last, but.
Yeah.
I mean, there's.
I tell you, it's
I
really
agree.
You ever do, you should go get the best.
I remember the baseball players, every single baseball player.
That was last year, though.
They-
And they redid that.
And they were correct.
Like I had the basketball players, they would come over and I would put dinner. They were like, oh, this is so good when I really didn't do anything, just put any extra.
You don't go like, you're gonna die. That's the best thing. Yeah.
That's the wall.
It's like, oh, cause like,
So there.
not all Jews, so it's like, okay, well.
That could be a really good example. One, a lot of
If you
people
let
are
the
saying.
Jews come into power, then these are the bad consequences.
Yeah,
that are
yeah.
gonna
So
happen.
that's it's like 20 miles of law.
So in that
If we
example,
started
the
it
Department
and
of
people were
Political
working on
Economy
it,
did
it would like create jobs.
Checks out.
I mean, when you.
I mean, so
So we can say.
So I'm gonna do this.
Like there's somewhere there kind of.
Yeah.
It's not organic thing, but there's like, you see one where
does that person have
they're going down.
over just
But that's the border security. I'm gonna go
Voting
along.
did, or they might sign up with bad things.
oh, well, if you go and vote for insert candidate here, they're gonna put in
These things I do, these things they do.
Is that for November?
That's where legitimate power,
Legitimate.
is that kind of, does that make sense? Are you gonna say legitimate?
No, just, I mean, just go through it, so, like, say you're checking the boxes, so legitimate is, you know, this is best for society, it's the right thing to do, so, in your guys' example of building the wall, is, like, this, is it, you know, is it because society says so, and it's the right thing to do? If you can make that justification, then you're good to go, if not, you don't want to think about different examples.
Stay like the man.
I'm just kidding, I don't know, if it's just like after.
Presidential, official, and then there's some where they'll kind of like, do the, I'm just an average citizen like you. I don't know. Maybe just above
If you're not
like
gonna
that.
have
But-
post 9/11 or
You're gonna fall
I guess it was somewhat.
yeah. So, you know, if you don't vote for insert candidate here, then you're not really there. You know how we treat non-Americans, you know how we treated non-Americans, or people who
Probably have to
think we're
work with
Americans,
political
post
aspects.
9/11.
So you guys are just about done then? Okay, these groups, you just about done? Okay, so I'll give you guys a couple more minutes to finish up, but then we gotta be moving on.
Are we presenting these?
No, you'll just be turning in minutes. This is a quiz, it's a graded quiz, so. So if you wanna go through, make sure you double check
Are
everything.
you gonna get a quiz? Sure. I mean, it's not like any of you guys ever do bad in class, like, you guys are all,
We do good.
but what is real good, Ian?
Communicational philosophy.
The greatest amount of benefit for the greatest amount of people, to minimize suffering.
Before sociology was a field, it was basically a bunch of philosophers, and then it kind of formed into sociology.
All science.
I'm just trying to make it.
Philosophy at some point.
Yeah, it's.
And it was magic even before that, it was sufficiently advanced science.
So.
And then it's all yellow.
Wait, does that mean like in 100 years, we're gonna have scientists who are basically like magicians to us?
According to Thor, you know, the movie Thor, he was like, you know, what you call magic, we call science. And someone was saying, oh, you got a Thor tattoo.
It's just a Viking style tattoo.
I like.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, half the things that, if you'd like trying to explain to people a long time ago, oh, you'll have this little slab that can do give you almost any information you want. It'd be like, yeah, whatever.
I've often had that thought, how people would react if we brought up Thor at the time, like, you know, from the 1800s and now.
What's that really funny meme, like trying to make a list of things like that would kill a Victorian child these days, just like, you know, the internet would, you know, die of shock. Yeah, yeah, I mean, I guess cell phones really started getting popular when I was like in middle school. And, you know, like had I thought about that when I was younger, I'd been like, well, what do you need that for? You just go to their house or you just talk to them.
Are we turning our answers into?
You'll turn your answers in. Because I already sent her the slides, so she'll know.
Yeah, and I already posted the slides for you guys in Canvas, and then I'll post this lecture too. When I use the recording of it, just in case you want to reference it for later. So.
Yeah, and this isn't the complete chapter, so do you want me to give you the complete chapter when I get it done, the PowerPoint?
I mean, if you want to, and then I'll just post it for them just so they have it as a reference if they're interested in something like that.
Yep. All right, my side, just about done?
30 seconds.
30 seconds, okay.
Reward Trump said he would get another stimulus check.
Sounds good.
I'll vote for Trump because he's already president.
That would be what, that legitimate power or something? He's already president, so may as well keep him in or something like that?
And there are people who, plenty of people that vote that way.
It will be overall because everyone there wants that.
Because you keep things.
I just wonder, like, if we time traveled or whatever, like, who would we as modern people vote for, like, historical presidents? Like, would we be the person who, you know, voted for Roosevelt or, you know?
Well, I was reading up on benevolent dictators.
Sorry.
So usually, right here, no, it was like, because obviously dictator has such a negative connotation. We think of like Pol Pot, we think of, you know, Hitler, Mussolini. But then I was reading up on it, and they were talking about like the benevolent dictators, like Ataturk. He was like, he basically brought Turkey out of the Ottoman Empire into like what it is today. And he was absolutely a dictator. He had all the power, but he was seen as benevolent because he did not misuse that power. That was an interesting one to look into. There were a few others as well that they come up with.
Man, Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah, like the 5 great.
Marcus Aurelius.
Marcus Aurelius, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy was awesome. I actually am reading this book right now.
Meditations.
Yeah.
How the economy was.
Like occasionally there are quotes from meditations up on my board in the mornings, depending on what we're talking about in class that day. Should I say facts?
Or, yeah.
That's not what.
About the economy.
What did you say that the registration date got extended?
Yeah, it got pushed. I want to say like October 23rd or 23rd. Such a Mexican thing to do.
Is it?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't see that here in the States.
Wait, what was it? Oh,
That's how you say yes. You know, if your mouth's full, like if you're skiing, so that's how you say yes when your mouth's full. That's no.
are you from down in the colonies?
Yeah.
Okay, you guys all done?
Yes.
All right, I'll take your paper then.
We're gonna go to the-
Oh yeah, make sure all your names are on.
You guys are all in my collection, the only names. So, I'd like to think at this point in the semester I know who you all are.
Spell your guys' names for me.
I'm pretty sure it's got.
C-A-N.
Ian, I doubt I can forget about you if I wanted to.
Even when I talk about rocket stuff,
Wait, say the first part again.
so remember, we talked about sociological mathematician.
I'm done.
No, don't worry, you do your best.
It's wisdom and this.
Yeah.
I don't think it's really class, but I mean, it's something that they'll probably talk about either way.
Really,
I would say,
So we're gonna have to test here.
I will not. All right.
And then next, They all fail an election, third class, but it's probably, it'll be a little bit on.
Sorry,
You guys have already
so
got
I forgot my.
So we might,
backtrack at work.
yeah.
And so, and I have my
Next week will
notes.
probably be more than if you want
And
to
so I
come in
have
and join us.
So you're just taking pictures, that works?
We
No, I'm
are-
writing it down.
Oh, you're writing it down, okay, that works too, but, I mean, Denise, she takes pictures all the time, right? That's your go-to. Okay,
Yeah, but I won't look at the pictures.
so remember, when it's in-class quizzes, I'm like Oprah, you get points, everyone gets points. Like, it's not gonna be a tough grader. As long as I see that you're putting in the effort and that you're more or less getting the gist of what we're trying to talk about, you're gonna be good to go. Okay, so that was the 6 types of power theory. And then Blood and Wolf's resource theory. First of all, let's just recognize what a crazy combination of last names that is.
Yeah, it's nice.
Like, it sounds like very like Nordic, like Viking kind of deal. Like, these are like berserkers and they're out studying resource theory and stuff. Really gory combination, love it. But anyway, Blood and Wolf, they came up with resource theory. And that basically says whoever has the most resources has the most power in a relationship. Now, for those that are marriage and family, if we think back to our theoretical perspectives, which one does that sound the most like? So between functionalist, conflict, and symbolic interactionist. Conflict, yeah, conflict theory. So conflict theory, and well, actually intro, I could have asked Kendra as well. So, conflict theory, we're talking about, hey, some person has more resources than the other one, so they have more power than the other person does. Okay, so resources in a relationship, that can be money, that can be sex, that can be education, occupation, all these can be resources and motivators. So you get like those stereotypical that you see in the media where the woman withholds sex from her husband until, he goes and like cleans the garage. You see the kind of the one where it's like, oh, this, you got the sugar daddy situation where he's got all this money, and so he's able to dictate, that the girl comes on this date when, or, and so for my class, I've asked this question. So for you girls, like, how many of you have gotten unsolicited messages from someone on Facebook or Snapchat saying, hey, chat me up and I'll like pay you or something? Anyone been like, yeah, happens all the time. A lot more than I thought I was really expecting, to be honest. When I was polling my class, there was one class where it was every single girl had gotten a message from a prospective sugar daddy saying, hey, send me a picture of your feet for $20 or something. Was that in here? Was that one of you?
That's a great deal.
Yeah, $20 for a picture of your feet?
It's
Like,
not $20. They sell for like 400, 500.
I mean,
Or like 1,000, seriously.
yeah,
It's
it's,
a good
You
business.
can see
My
them
boyfriend won't let me
you can
do it.
see them on the internet and stuff. It's weird.
yeah, I have a girl in one of my classes that she's made about $600 from that kind of stuff. And so resource theorists would see that and say, hey, because she doesn't have money, she now has to do this thing, send a picture of her feet or whatever it is. That's the most benevolent thing I can think of, is sending a picture of your feet. Some people are a lot more forward on what they want for money. But yeah, and you see this in relationships. One of the, so for marriage and family, if you remember, we talked about how there's the pay gap between men and women. It's not necessarily like a pay gap like in jobs, but do you remember what happens? Why it is that women make less money? Was that this class or was that another class? Social problems. I always mix up my classes. Yeah, we did talk about it a little bit. So it's the having children reset, right?
Healthcare for the child, daycare, like a whole lot of things you can't get.
Yeah. All right.
Women are also less likely to negotiate their salaries.
There you go. And that actually is true. We did talk about that data-wise. Women are less likely to negotiate their salaries, becoming more and more where it's becoming socially acceptable, but still statistically less likely to do that, meaning that they have less earning potential because of it. So yeah, all this boils down to resource theory. You got Waller's principle of least interest, not nearly as cool of a last name as Wolf and Blood. So this one states that whoever has the least, that's supposed to say least, typo, least interest in the relationship has the most power. Meaning, hey, I'm not as invested in this as you are. You're super into me, but I'm not super into you. I could take it or leave it. So because of that, I have more power in the relationship. If you do something I don't like, I'm just going to peace out. Whereas if I do something that you don't like, you're going to try and make it work, or you're going to try and stick with it and just accept it. That's this theory when it comes to power in relationships, is least interest. You also get that a little bit in like the parent-child dynamic, like teenagers, which all of you are still teens or close to it, right? Anyone like in their 20s or 30s? Not too far removed from teenager then, okay? So you were a teenager a few years ago. Teenagers, you're really, and it's not anything against you, but like biologically speaking, you're more egocentric because your brain's still developing, you're focused on your friends and your relationships and all that. So if we were talking about the parent-teenager dynamic, teenagers are usually a lot less invested in the relationship than the parents are. Parents are wanting to see you succeed. They're trying to mold you and motivate you. Teenagers are like, I just want to go live my life and hang out with my friends. So according to this principle, that the teenager would have more power in that relationship because of that. So that's why you get kind of a choking of, like butting heads, because for all your life, parent has the power, child is there, and then all of a sudden you start developing your independence and it gets flip-flopped, and it can be a difficult transition for anyone. Okay. So first of all, can we just point out how happy this girl looks? Like when I found this picture, it just brought me so much joy. Because like he's smiling, like he's a happy guy, but she is just ecstatic. Like nothing happier going on right now.
I'd say you can't tell that she's not just trying to eat his ear.
That's true. Or I mean, she's got a flower. It could be an edible flower, and she's just like reaching down for it. But based off my interpretation, very happy individual.
That's a Tyson move.
Yeah, that's going for the ear. I saw that fight live, and I was young and it was crazy. Okay.
She's showing off her, so it's probably an engagement shoot. So she's probably just enthused that
He liked it, so he put a ring on it, and she's super happy about that. Yep. Okay. John Gottman. So for my class, they all know who John Gottman is. John Gottman is like the de facto researcher on marriage and happiness and relationships. Like he is the authority on it. He came up with all the books. The project we're doing in my class, which is called a love map, is one of his creations. And he went out and he did his research, and he found that couples who experience 5 times more positive feelings and experiences and interactions than negative ones have the most enduring marriages and relationships. They're the most likely to succeed. I'm not telling you to go to your significant other and like start counting out like, oh, here's 5 positive, here's a -1. Like you don't have to do the ratio, but he's just saying if you actually look at the data, that's the ratio you want to look at. At least 5 and above means you're in a pretty good relationship. He actually goes on to talk about the negative interactions that derail relationships, and he calls them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which is a very like intense way of like referring to it. But he's like, it's essentially doomsday. If you're doing these things in your relationship, you are committing doomsday in your relationship. So we'll learn more about that on Tuesday. And you guys are coming Tuesday, right?
Oh yeah, I mean Tuesday, because I'm gonna come lecture the first half on nonverbals and
Yep.
stuff, and then I wasn't sure what we were gonna do then. So yeah, I guess if you guys want to come for the second half, and if you guys already got the first 30 minutes or so, then maybe show up at 1:30ish. Did I just speak English there? Like I feel like I like.
Yep, you were good.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So we're going to finish class by watching this video and debriefing on it a little bit. Anyone here heard of Brene Brown?
Sounds really familiar.
She's a very well-known social science researcher. She's also published a few books. Like if you get on Facebook, her quote is usually somewhere on your feed at some point. And so we've talked a little bit about power in relationships, but one of the things that she talks about is the power, not of like the 6 types we talked about, but she talks about the power of vulnerability and how vulnerability is the key to improving your life in whatever capacity. So it's a great video. I figured we'd watch it and then we'll get together and discuss it a little bit. And so we'll share this. And I'm just realizing I never shared my screen on Zoom, so they're just gonna hear me talk, but they won't actually see the screens, but they have the slides.
Yeah, they have the slides.
So that's fine.
Yeah, and guys, let me just point out, this is probably kind of similar to the Elaine Baton that we watched the other day, like that activity we did where we all shared something that like made us happy, something we were ashamed about, all that jazz. So,
Yeah, she talks about shame quite a bit. Yeah.
yeah, we did that activity in class where we all went around and said it was one thing that we were ashamed of, one thing that we were.
So I'll start with this.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. The video just started.
Something we were ashamed of, something that we wish we could change or whatever. and something that made us sad.
Yeah.
So yeah, we all got to know each other really well that day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Okay. So in my class, I always dim the lights when we watch a video, and I just say, hey, if you're falling asleep, feel free to stand up, walk around. No set, you don't need to be taking notes on this one. But we will be debriefing on the material. So I want you to really be paying attention and really like try and pay attention to what sticks out to you from her discussion.
So a couple of years ago, an event planner called me because I was going to do a speaking event. And she called and she said, I'm really struggling with how to write about you on the little flyer. I thought, well, what's the struggle? And she said, well, I saw you speak and I'm going to call you a researcher, I think, but I'm afraid if
I don't know what's going on. It likes to do this in the afternoons. Do you have the same problem on your computer where it likes to just stop going?
no, my lights just like to flicker instead.
Okay. My morning class, it's never an issue, but my afternoon class, for whatever reason.
I call you a researcher, no one will come because they'll think you're boring and irrelevant. And I was like, okay. And she said, so the thing I liked about your talk is, you're a storyteller. So I think what I'll do is just call you a storyteller. And of course, the academic, insecure part of me was like, you're going to call me a what? And she said, I'm going to call you a storyteller. And I was like, oh, why not Magic Pixie? I was like, let me think about this for a second. And so I tried to call deep on my courage. And I thought, I am a storyteller. I'm a qualitative researcher. I collect stories. That's what I do. And maybe stories are just data with a soul, and maybe I'm just a storyteller. So I said, you know what? Why don't you just say I'm a researcher storyteller? And she went, there's no such thing. So I'm a researcher or storyteller. And I'm going to talk to you today. We're talking about expanding perception. And so I want to talk to you and tell some stories about a piece of my research that fundamentally expanded my perception and really actually changed the way that I live and love and work and parent. And this is where my story starts. When I was a young researcher, doctoral student, my first year I had a research professor who said to us, here's the thing, if you cannot measure it, it does not exist. And I thought he was just sweet talking to me. I was like, really? And he's like, absolutely. So you have to understand that I have a bachelor's in social work, a master's in social work, and I was doing my PhD in social work. So my entire academic career was surrounded by people who kind of believed in the life's messy, love it, and I'm more of the life's messy, clean it up, organize it, and put it into a bento box. And so to think that I had found my way, to found a career that takes me, really one of the big sayings in social work is lean into the discomfort of the work. And I'm like, knock discomfort upside the head and move it over and get all A's. That was my mantra. So I was very excited about this. And so I thought, you know what, this is the career for me because I am interested in some messy topics, but I want to be able to make them not messy. I want to understand them. I want to hack into these things that I know are important and lay the code out for everyone to see. So where I started was with connection, because by the time you're a social worker for 10 years, what you realize is that connection is why we're here. It's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. This is what it's all about. It doesn't matter whether you talk to people who work in social justice and mental health and abuse and neglect. What we know is that connection, the ability to feel connected, is neurobiologically, that's how we're wired, it's why we're here. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to start with connection. Well, that situation where you get an evaluation from your boss and she tells you 37 things that you do really awesome and one thing that you kind of have an opportunity for growth. And all you can think about is that opportunity for growth, right? Well, apparently this is the way my work went as well, because when you ask people about love, they tell you about heartbreak. When you ask people about belonging, they'll tell you the most excruciating experiences of being excluded. And when you ask people about connection, the stories they told me were about disconnection. So very quickly, really about 6 weeks into this research, I ran into this unnamed thing that absolutely unraveled connection in a way that I didn't understand or had never seen. And so I pulled back out of the research and thought, I need to figure out what this is. And it turned out to be shame. And shame is really easily understood as the fear of disconnection. Is there something about me that if other people know it or see it, that I won't be worthy of connection? The things I can tell you about it, it's universal. We all have it. The only people who don't experience shame have no capacity for human empathy or connection. No one wants to talk about it, and the less you talk about it, the more you have it. What underpinned this shame, this I'm not good enough, which we all know that feeling, I'm not blank enough, I'm not thin enough, rich enough, beautiful enough, smart enough, promoted enough. The thing that underpinned this was excruciating vulnerability. This idea of, in order for connection to happen, we have to allow ourselves to be seen, really seen. And you know how I feel about vulnerability. I hate vulnerability. And so I thought, this is my chance to beat it back with my measuring stick. I'm going in, I'm gonna figure this stuff out, I'm gonna spend a year, I'm gonna totally deconstruct shame, I'm gonna understand how vulnerability works, and I'm gonna outsmart it. So I was ready, and I was really excited. As you know, it's not gonna turn out well. You know this. So I can tell you a lot about shame, but I'd have to borrow everyone else's time. But here's what I can tell you that it boils down to. And this may be one of the most important things that I've ever learned in the decade of doing this research. My 1 year turned into 6 years, thousands of stories, hundreds of long interviews, focus groups. At one point, people were sending me journal pages and sending me their stories, thousands of pieces of data, and 6 years. And I kind of got a handle on it. I kind of understood this is what shame is, this is how it works. I wrote a book, I published a theory that something was not okay. And what it was is that if I roughly took the people I interviewed and divided them into people who really have a sense of worthiness, that's what this comes down to, a sense of worthiness. They have a strong sense of love and belonging. And folks who struggle for it, and folks who are always wondering if they're good enough. It was only one variable that separated the people who have a strong sense of love and belonging and the people who really struggle for it, and that was the people who have a strong sense of love and belonging believe they're worthy of love and belonging. That's it. They believe they're worthy. And to me, the hard part of the one thing that keeps us out of connection is our fear that we're not worthy of connection. Was something that personally and professionally I felt like I needed to understand better. So what I did is I took all of the interviews where I saw worthiness, where I saw people living that way, and just looked at those. What do these people have in common? And I have a slight office supply addiction, but it's another talk. So I had a manila notebook, a manila folder, and I had a Sharpie. And I was like, what am I going to call this research? And the first words that came to my mind were wholehearted. These are kind of wholehearted people living from this deep sense of worthiness. So I wrote at the top of the manila folder. And I started looking at the data. In fact, I did it first in this in a 4-day, very intensive data analysis where I went back, pulled these interviews, pulled the stories, pulled the incidents. What's the theme? What's the pattern? My husband left town with the kids. Because I always go into this kind of Jackson Pollock crazy thing where I'm just like writing and going and kind of just in my researcher mode. And so here's what I found. What they had in common was a sense of courage. And I want to separate courage and bravery for you for a minute. Courage, the original definition of courage, when it first came into the English language, is from the Latin word cur, meaning heart. And the original definition was to tell the story of who you are with your whole heart. And so these folks had, very simply, the courage to be imperfect. They had the compassion to be kind to themselves first and then to others, because as it turns out, we can't practice compassion with other people if we can't treat ourselves kindly. And the last is they had connection, and this was the hard part, as a result of authenticity. They were willing to let go of who they thought they should be in order to be who they were, which is, you have to absolutely do that for connection. The other thing that they had in common was this. They fully embraced vulnerability. They believed that what made them vulnerable made them beautiful. They didn't talk about vulnerability being comfortable, nor did they really talk about it being excruciating, as I had heard it earlier in the shame interviewing. They just talked about it being necessary. They talked about the willingness to say, I love you first. The willingness to do something where there are no guarantees. The willingness to breathe through waiting for the doctor to call after your mammogram. You're willing to invest in a relationship that may or may not work out. They thought this was fundamental. I personally thought it was betrayal. I could not believe I had pledged allegiance to research, where our job, the definition of research is to control and predict, to study phenomena for the explicit reason to control and predict. And now my my mission to control and predict had turned up the answer that the way to live is with vulnerability and to stop controlling and predicting. This led to a little breakdown, which actually looked more like this. And it did. It led to I call it a breakdown, my therapist calls it a spiritual awakening. Spiritual awakening sounds better than breakdown, but I assure you it was a breakdown. And I had to put my data away and go find a therapist. Let me tell you something. You know who you are when you call your friends and say, I think I need to see somebody. Do you have any recommendations? Because about 5 of my friends are like, ooh, I wouldn't want to be your therapist. And I was like, what does that mean? And they're like, I'm just saying, don't bring your measuring stick. Okay. So I found a therapist. My first meeting with her, Diana, I brought in my list of the way the wholehearted live. And I sat down and she said, how are you? And I said, I'm great, I'm okay. She said, what's going on? And I said, and this is a therapist who sees therapists, because we have to go to those because their BS meters are good. And so I said, here's the thing, I'm struggling. And she said, what's the struggle? And I said, well, I have a vulnerability issue. And, and I know that vulnerability is kind of the core of shame and fear and our struggle for worthiness, but it appears that it's also the birthplace of joy and creativity, of belonging, of love. And I think I have a problem. And I need some help. And I said, but here's the thing, no family stuff, no childhood shit. I just need some strategies. Thank you. So she goes like this. And then I said, it's bad, right? She said, it's neither good nor bad. It just is what it is. And I said, oh my God, this is gonna suck. And it did, and it didn't. And it took about a year. And you know how there are people that, like, when they realize that vulnerability and tenderness are important, that they kind of surrender and walk into it? A, that's not me. And B, I don't even hang out with people like that. For me, it was a year-long street fight. It was a slugfest. Vulnerability pushed, I pushed back. I lost. the fight, but probably won my life back. And so then I went back into the research and spent the next couple of years really trying to understand what the wholehearted, what the choices they were making, and what are we doing with vulnerability? Why do we struggle with it so much? Am I alone in struggling with vulnerability? No. So this is what I learned. We numb vulnerability. When we're waiting for the call, it was funny, I sent something out on Twitter and on Facebook that says, well, how would you define vulnerability? What makes you feel vulnerable? And within an hour and a half, I had 150 responses. Because I wanted to know, what's out there. Having to ask my husband for help because I'm sick and we're newly married. Initiating sex with my husband, initiating sex with my wife. Being turned down, asking someone out, waiting for the doctor to call back, getting laid off, laying off people. This is the world we live in. We live in a vulnerable world. And one of the ways we deal with it is we numb vulnerability. And I think there's evidence, and it's not the only reason this evidence exists, but I think that it's a huge cause. We are the most in debt, obese, addicted, and medicated adult cohort in US history. The problem is, and I learned this from the research, that you cannot selectively numb emotion. You can't say, here's the bad stuff. Here's vulnerability, here's grief, here's shame, here's fear, here's disappointment. I don't want to feel these. I'm gonna have a couple of beers with a banana nut muffin. I don't want to feel these. And I know that's knowing laughter. I hack into your lives for a living. I know that's, God. You can't numb those hard feelings without numbing the other affects or emotions. You cannot selectively numb. So when we numb those, we numb joy. We numb gratitude. We numb happiness. And then we are miserable and we are looking for purpose and meaning. And then we feel vulnerable. So then we have a couple of years in and nothing. And it becomes this dangerous cycle. One of the things that I think that we need to think about is why and how we numb. And it doesn't just have to be addiction. The other thing we do is we make everything that's uncertain certain. Religion has gone from a belief in faith and mystery to certainty. I'm right, you're wrong, shut up. That's it. Just certainty. The more afraid we are, the more vulnerable we are, the more afraid we are. This is what politics looks like today. There's no discourse anymore. There's no conversation. There's just blame. You know how blame is described in research? A way to discharge pain and discomfort. We perfect, if there's anyone who wants their life to look like this, it would be me. But it doesn't work, because what we do is we take fat from our butts and put it in our cheeks. Which just, I hope in 100 years people will look back and go, and we perfect, most dangerously, our children. Let me tell you what we think about children. They're hardwired for struggle when they get here. When you hold those perfect little babies in your hand, our job is not to say, look at her, she's perfect. My job is just to keep her perfect, make sure she makes it to this team by 5th grade and yell by 7th grade. That's not our job. Our job is to look and say, you know what? You're imperfect and you're wired for struggle, but you are worthy of love and belonging. That's our job. Show me a generation of kids raised like that, and we'll end the problems I think that we see today. We pretend that what we do doesn't have an effect on people. We do that in our personal lives. We do that corporate, whether it's a bailout, an oil spill, a recall. We pretend like what we're doing doesn't have a huge impact on other people. I would say to companies, this is not our first rodeo, people. We just need you to be authentic and real and say, we're sorry, we'll fix it. But there's another way, and I'll leave you with this. This is what I found. To let ourselves be seen, deeply seen, vulnerably seen. to love with our whole hearts, even though there's no guarantee. And that's really hard. I can tell you as a parent, that's excruciatingly difficult. To practice gratitude and joy in those moments of kind of terror when we're wondering, can I love you this much? Can I believe in this as passionately? Can I be this fierce about this? Just to be able to stop and instead of catastrophizing what might happen, to say, I'm just so grateful. Because to feel this vulnerable means I'm alive. And the last, which I think is probably the most important, is to believe that we're enough. Because when we work from a place, I believe, that says, I'm enough, then we stop screaming and start listening. We're kinder and gentler to the people around us, and we're kinder and gentler to ourselves. That's all I have.
Heart rate's 120, BP's 140/90.
All right. So we're going to take the last few minutes of class just to recap and debrief. So once again, getting in groups. Well, actually, this says groups, but really I'd like for you to partner up. So, find a partner to speak with. And I want you to just share with them what stood out in that video. There was a lot of information she shared, a lot of great information. It's okay if you didn't get all of it, but share what stood out to you, how you're going to use what you learned, like what stood out to you in your relationships. Doesn't have to be romantic, just any sort of interaction that you have. And then your opinion on whether or not being vulnerable is a kind of power. We've talked about a few power types, but I want you to think about, do you think that being able to be vulnerable is in itself powerful? Okay, so partner up, find someone to talk to. Could be someone right next to you, could be someone across the room, but I want you to go ahead and chat with them and we'll take about 5 minutes to go over that.
It was a lesson, but I hated it the entire time.
It's okay.
Another thing that was like, when kids would kind of scrap for first research on it, and take this percentage of what she had going, then hate her results, wait for it, and so trying to open up, I guess. Nitty gritty stuff in relationships.
I mean, not really like I cover.
Yeah, being vulnerable can be power both ways. You have a lot of self-control, self-power. If you're able to be vulnerable, also, again, love how much to do, because you can be vulnerable all the wrong ways, and it just hurts you. Totally like seeing. one of those characteristics if the whole world can do it. It's better for it, but it's not going to happen.
So I'll give you guys about another minute to finish up.
Probably because sometimes I think you're going to do kind of
Am I doing it?
your security thought and stuff like that.
Hmm?
You're doing what?
Your hair's covered in hair, so I can't tell if you're doing it.
Her eyebrows.
Eyebrows are going.
I can't remember.
If I think about it too much, then.
I can't do them at the same time anymore. Like one goes first. Because I've done the opposite so much.
Even though you had just said
I can't do one.
Yeah, some people can do both, some people can't do any.
I
No.
don't even know. You don't even know how to get your body to do it.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's like a gene thing. All right, so let's go ahead and bring it back.
I agree.
Yeah, please.
So I'm hoping all of you were able to share with your partner and able to kind of like really cement what we learned about. So within, marriage and family, of course, like we talk a lot about different theories. Like we went over the different theories. We got to learn the sociological side of it. But really, it doesn't matter how much of the sociology we learn about it if it's not improving our lives. So that's why we watch videos like this. That's why we like come together and have activities where we're like, how is that going to make us change? So do any brave souls feel like sharing like what it is that stood out to them and what they would like to do differently in their lives? Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
I like that she was saying about that people like use substances to like hide their feelings and it like gets rid of all of their emotion. At least to me. How I would like use this in my relationships, I think I would be less hard on myself about what other people think about what I'm saying instead of like worrying about like questioning what I'm saying to others instead of just point out the same.
Yeah, because that's closing yourself off if you're like, like constantly policing yourself. And then she talked about having compassion for yourself as well. Perfect. All right, anyone else?
One thing that I'd kind of almost add to that just a little bit is I know sometimes I used to just kind of like use going to the gym almost as a way of numbing things out, just kind of like cover up one pain with some other pain.
I couldn't tell. But, so it really anything in excess. It doesn't have to be substances. It could be, whatever. It could be video games. It could be working out. It could be whatever that you're trying to mask pain with. Because you're also masking all the positive emotions that can come to you. The working out's a good one because it all releases those good endorphins and all that.
I think part of it could be too is like you can definitely be vulnerable in excess as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because personally, I know I am, and as you laugh at it, that's true. But, what was that?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing on the point that, yeah, you can say too much.
Yeah. But you can definitely too much of anything in excess, like you said, can be, negative. Because if you're too vulnerable and too open to people and, always the first one to say, I love you, or always the one who's, willing to just be like, yeah, I'm always 100% all in, then it's very much a recipe for letting other people walk all over you.
Yeah. And she mentions that vulnerability is the base of success and joy and happiness, but also it's where sadness and anger and all that can start. So that's why life's hard. That's why I like this part is because it all, it starts off with being vulnerable and then it can go one of directions. And then we just got to learn skills on how to self-correct and bring it back and feel good about ourselves. But yeah. All right. Well, that's it for class today. For my class on Thursday, bring a computer with you. We're going to have a couple presentations going on, or a smartphone, something you can access the internet. For communications, we were glad to have you today. We'll see you next week.
We'll also see you guys on Thursday because we'll be in here for the safe house.
Oh, right. So Thursday for the safe house. Yeah.
Wasn't it last Thursday?
It's this Thursday. Yeah.
Oh.
And registration is opening up on Thursday. Make sure you sign up for your spring classes. And sociology is always a great time. Just plugging myself in there. Yeah, and I'm going to confirm with the safe house today just to make sure, because
Thanks for having us.
thanks for coming. It was great having you guys in here.